are agitated with this 3-pack.
Where do I begin with this Amazon exclusive Marvel Legends Venom 3-pack? This is meant to be not necessarily tied at all to the 60th anniversary line that's currently ongoing that I've been covering on the channel thus far. This is meant to be more like an offshoot from Marvel Legends where they're trying to commemorate just a really cool set here to pretty much showcase Venom, his singular comic book story arc where he's pretty much the lethal protector, but he's got his own villains to go up against with him. And the set coming in at a whopping $77.99 includes, of course, Venom, Agony, and Riot. Whoa. Okay. I'm sorry, Marvel's Riot. I guess there's another Riot out there. I don't understand the... I'll have to look into the legalities of that, but this is technically Marvel's Riot. Now, before we get to the actual 3 figures themselves, I really do have to throw out some kudos to that packaging. They decided to go with a very evenly shaped rectangular box, and the cover art on it is absolutely gorgeous. Look at this thing. This hand-drawn animation. You even have some of the artists having their signatures there off to the side. But at the focal point, we have Venom versus Riot with Agony coming in there in the middle and leaving a destruction in their wake. And to me, this is just immaculate. This is a very well-shaded, well-colored, well-stenciled cover art that really showcases exactly why Venom probably got his own comic book story arc in the first place, his own standoff, spin-off, entire property, and probably why Sony saw that as an opportunity to make a standalone movie. The Venom logo at the bottom left, and then for the first time, at least from my understanding, from my viewpoint, we finally get a little logo next to the Hasbro logo that actually says plastic-free packaging, letting you know that there's no plastic included except for tape and glue. On the sides, we have portraits of the characters from that key cover art along with their names, but on the back, we just have a standard breakdown of their characters with different language interpretations of it, as well as those key portraits from the cover art once again. So I think they could have done a little bit extra there on the back, but it's good to see that they didn't really hold back on the cover art looking very cool and very collectible, and also the box itself is very easy to open and package the figures inside. Now, mind you, when you do open the box, you are going to be greeted with some assembly because not all of the figures come in one collectible swoop. You actually have to put some of them together, such as Agony's head and Riot's back. I guess he was just a little bit too girthy to actually fit in the box as is, so you kind of have to just pop that piece in there, and now you pretty much have the 3 figures that you see before you here. And I am very heavily conflicted as to whether or not I made a very sensible purchase. See, I was greeted with a very honorable first impression by the packaging. I thought to myself, wow, we really are getting our money's worth by going a little bit extra with the box, the cover art, making it look like something that a collector would be proud of to have in their set, to have probably up on the mantelpiece. Upon pulling the figures out, I noticed some very key warning signs that made me think that 1 out of 3 really is that bad, and it might not just be worth it. Let's start off with easily my least favorite is going to be Agony. And yeah, she is very arguably the lesser known, at least from my perspective. So I thought to myself, okay, I'm trying to separate a bias as to whether or not I don't like her because she's the one that I know the least of. I know that Riot has always been an antagonist for Venom in his own standalone comic. And of course, we got Venom quintessential Eddie Brock over there. So Agony being kind of like the outcast could have had some preconceived notions about her. But no, I was actually very in the right of casting doubt on her because as I pulled her out of the box, 2 things. 1, you have to pop the head in, and popping that head onto her, due to some assembly being required, is in fact an agony. She lives up to her name. She was an agony to assemble. I don't know what they did to that head sculpt, or at least the joint, or maybe the ball joint, or the socket inside, but some of it was sculpted in a very offshoot kind of way that it was a ginormous pain to put this head onto her. It's excruciating. Not only that, but it also gave me a little bit of fear that I was going to break that piece because it started to actually warp as I pressed down on the head sculpt, and you can see a little bit, it's tough to see it now because the head is obviously covering it, as well as her very illustrious hair that she's got coiling over here in the back. But you have this joint right here that's already starting to show those little white streaks of warping. Whenever you see a piece of plastic just bending all around, you can kind of see a little bit of that white start to flex before it eventually breaks. And I have a enormous fear of what could happen to that neck joint should I continue to move it about. So I have to pretty much limit myself from ever so doing that. And then as I scanned and observed the figure overall, the timing could not have been any more perfect, because I feel like I just reviewed this figure, and upon closer inspection you will notice that I was definitely in the right. It's Spinneret. It's the same body type as Spinneret. They literally repainted Spinneret's body, which might have been used for a prior Marvel Legends figure, I'll give them that, but at least upon my current trajectory of collecting figures, Spinneret was the first of that body mold that I've ever covered on the channel and ever collected. So to see that Spinneret pretty much is a repaint of that body sculpt, it was like, okay, well, we're essentially just dealing with the same figure here, only it's got the Agony repaint color scheme as well as the head sculpt to match. And outside of that, the only other distinctions would have to be the clawed up hands and of course the toes popping out of the feet right here to give her a much more symbiotic presence beyond the more endowed ones here on the front, because she's not really wearing a costume. She's wearing a symbiote suit attached that's supposed to be a bit more skin tight. We're not going to go down that road again. The only road we will go down, at least as quickly as I possibly can, will be the articulation, because if you guys want a further in-depth look at that articulation, you can just check out my Spider-Man and Spinneret review, because it's, again, a repaint. Now, one thing we will have to skip on is that head articulation, because like I mentioned, popping this head on was just the worst. I don't know if I was the only one dealt with this hand, but if you guys did manage to pick up this collection, let me know in the comments. Was your agony an agonizing pain to put the head sculpt onto the ball socket joint right here? And how long did it take you? Or did you come into any worries or concerns that you were going to break this joint altogether like I did? Please let me know down below. So because of that, I can only really slightly pivot the head downwards and slightly upwards, but when doing so, she becomes so top heavy because of the way that her hair is sculpted in a way that sure looks pretty dynamic and cool and stylized, but it doesn't do me any favors where I'm still very much concerned with that head joint there. So not a whole lot doing it for me there. And when it comes to rotation, it's pretty much frozen because of how tight that joint and that socket really were to put on. Like it pretty much just canceled out all kind of movement left to the right. There's nothing found there, so pretty much static. When we get to the arms, we get to some more basic stuff. You're able to rotate the arm 360 degrees vertically, as well as extend towards the sides, much like Spinneret. We have, of course, the bicep amongst those noodly arms that I have complained about before, but those bicep swivels could be found there, as well as very tight elbow joints that are able to fully bend on both elbows, unlike Spinneret, so at least I'll give her a little bit of credit there. The wrists are able to fully rotate, as well as being able to bend inwards and outwards, much like prior ones. Similar to Spinneret, no waist articulation found of any kind due to the physique, but you do have that mid-torso cut that is able to fully rotate 360 degrees in a ratchetity position. Ratchetity? Did I just say that? And not much in the form of crunching inwards, but extension can be done all the way to the back, though the hair does come into contact with the voluptuous back rear there, so it's gonna restrict it a little bit more than Spinneret was able to do. Then we get to the top leg joints, which are able to fully extend the leg all the way forwards like so. Not much towards the back, but are able to extend. Actually, they did a little bit of a better job of extension, leg extension at least, to go a little beyond the 45 degree angle right there, but can go further than that. Thigh swivels that are fully able to rotate 360, as well as two joints on the knees that are fully able to bend all the way upwards. And then, of course, that infamous ankle joint that is able to pivot downwards, upwards, and not really rotate to the sides 360 evenly, but are able to slightly pivot inwards and outwards like so, and are fully able to rotate when you bend them down. Agony doesn't really come with any form of accessories except for some alternate fisted hands, But, you know, they're just standard fisted hands, so might as well leave the clawed up hands here since those are the only ones that have any form of very charismatic distinction that fit her symbiotic persona. Outside of that, it's pretty much, like I said, just a repaint of the prior female mold, and therefore I really don't have much to comment on except for that agonizing head sculpt. Now I want to move on over to Riot. Here you have him, and does this at all look like the guy you see on the cover art looking very, very antagonizing, villainous, going after Eddie Brock there, posing a threat, if you will? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would say that the physique and the molding that you have going on behind the bulging chest and muscles and all this stuff that is meant to be a much huskier, intimidating force for Venom to overcome is definitely in full force here. But here's the one thing that I can't really articulate very well on camera. You can only take my word for it as I feel him in hand. You know those toys that you find in bins whenever you go to a place like a vendor like Frank & Sons or possibly even a yard sale? That's kind of what I'm feeling a little bit with Riot here. I'm sorry, but in terms of the actual quality of plastic, it just feels, I don't want to say necessarily cheap, but definitely not like a full, you know, it's not, I don't know, for $77.99's worth, it just doesn't have that level of merit where, yeah, it's bigger, it's meant to be to scale to the other two characters, but there's just something behind the quality of plastic and the quality of assembly here, especially when you look inside of the figure itself during that assembly piece when you're putting together the back onto him, that he has that feel to him that just doesn't feel quite right, at least from my perspective. It probably leans a little bit more towards subjectivity, but to me, I was just a little underwhelmed by what we're dealt with here with Riot. In terms of actual little texture designs, I do like the veins and the little patches going alongside the skin texture here to look like a symbiotic presence, and I do like the little bits of tendrils kind of poking out from the back and the arms to give it, just a little bit of a visual aesthetic, a little nice little characteristic to latch onto, at least enough to distract away from the head sculpt, because even though it's not really painted or sculpted too badly, it definitely looks derpy to me. I don't know what it is, but there's something kind of derpy about his look here where you have the eyes a little bit more oval than the ones that you see on the cover art, so he looks a little less intimidating. He looks like he misses his father, Venom, which I guess you could consider somewhat canon.
You're not my dad!
I don't know, it just doesn't scream Riot to me, or I'm sorry, Marvel's Riot. I guess maybe it's because it's Marvel's Riot and not the original Riot that we got a look going on like this right here. Then we get to the articulation that is very stiff and robust enough for decent poses, but again, it just kind of feeds into my criticism about the quality of plastic, because when you get to the head, you're able to rotate it in place 360 evenly, but there is a slot underneath that is able to allow the head to move upwards and downwards, but the slot, much like the plastic, just feels kind of tiffy. It just feels somewhat cheap. It just feels, like I said, like one of those toys that you buy your 5-year-old kid because you know this thing is going to be very strong and sturdy, but at the same time, it's not necessarily a distinct collector's item. Then we get to the arms that are able to rotate vertically 360, as well as decently extend off to the sides via the hinge joint inside. No form of butterfly joints or swivels or shrugging motions found inside of there, but you do get biceps that are able to fully rotate 360 degrees in place. Only one joint at the elbow that is able to fully bend about 90 degrees right there, with no signs of any other joints found inside. And then we get the wrist joints that are able to fully rotate 360 and pivot inwards and outwards. Inside of this torso, you do manage to see right here a hinge that is very ratcheted. It even has a clicking motion, as you can see right there, but it mostly crunches inwards towards the front like so to kind of give him, like I said, a hulking presence like that. And actually that doesn't look all too bad. And there goes Agony over there. Screw her. So I'm sorry, just don't like that figure very much. But in terms of extension, kind of stops right about that point right there. So not much more going on in the form of proper torso extension, but you do get a waist cut that's able to fully rotate 360 degrees like so. So you have an awful lot of mobility there. We get to the top legs that are able to extend forwards only about that much. Not much going on towards the back, but you can still find the extension right about right there, almost at an even 180, but not quite. You got thigh swivels that are fully able to rotate there. This is where we do get a little bit on the complementary side, because not only do you get thigh swivels, as well as the two joints in the knee that is actually quite amazing for a figure of this size, but then you even got, I guess you could call it a boot cut. It's more so of an ankle cut right about right there above the proper ankle joint that allows it to fully rotate 360 degrees, and very much warranted considering that the ankle still has that same joint from the typical Marvel Legends that are able to pivot upwards and downwards but cannot really rotate on its own, except for when you kind of tilt it off to the sides like so, or outwards like that, and then fully bend it downwards to rotate it all the way around. So it's good to see that it's got the ankle cut right above it to allow mobility towards the sides horizontally on an even plane. And it's definitely something that's going to be needed, especially for a figure of this size. If you're going to be tackling Riot the way that this thing has, then you're going to need that posing to come through. Otherwise, it's going to be a nightmare. Riot only came with one accessory, and that is going to be his symbiote sickle right here that is able to swap any one of the two hands that are pretty easy to remove. You just give it a slight little tug. Comes off via that joint that you've seen many times before, only this time it's somewhat enlarged because of how much of a bigger figure he is. And then you can simply just pop in the sickle, except there is one little discrepancy that kind of disappointed me, which is that, yeah, big surprise for this 3 set so far, kind of stays consistent, so to speak, but it turns out that the sickle as well as the wrist cups right here are sculpted in a very specific manner that pretty much cancels out all articulation that you could have done with the sickle here. So the way that it's posed like this, right about right there, is pretty much it for how you can position the sickle, so to speak. So if you wanted to be creative in terms of the posing with the sickle in any other kind of way, especially the way that he has it demonstrated in the cover art, you pretty much can't really do that because it's sculpted in a offshoot kind of way, in an asymmetrical form, that the way it's posed is pretty much what you get. You can't really rotate it, you can't flex it the way that you can the standard hands, so you're pretty much just left with, well, right about that right there. And it does look badass, and it's sculpted very neatly, especially with the blade right here actually being on the pointed side, but not much else that you can really do with that. So that leaves us with the Lethal Protector Venom. And, you know, it's natural that I would leave the best for last so that we don't end on the sourest of notes, because arguably Venom here is in fact the best out of the Venom 3-pack. And obviously there's a little bit of biases there since he is the OG of these characters amongst his spin-off, but quite frankly, he's the one that was probably the best worked on as far as this 3-pack is concerned. Now, some of the other things that I mentioned before with the other two are still complacent here, especially that quality of plastic, that feel, that kind of, you know, non-premium feel that I found in a little bit in Riot is still carried on over with this Venom mold, specifically around the shoulders and legs, that I just have this feel amongst the fingers to the touch that just kind of feels off to me. Like I would prefer sticking with the traditional Marvel Legends, whether it be some of the classic ones from back in the day, even if it means paying a little bit extra, or going with something that was a bit more recent, like I would dare say the Venom movie repaint of the Venom King in Black Null and Venom 2-pack that recently came out from Marvel Legends celebrating the 60th anniversary. I would rather take that version than kind of this one here, because even though it is quintessential Venom as far as the color scheming is concerned, I really do like the symbiote logo here, the white symbiote logo on the chest that then wraps around towards the back. It's very easy to do, but they did an effective job. It's when we get to, again, the quality of plastic and the shaping of the musculature that, though it looks good on camera, it's like I said, the feel that to me just feels kind of off to me. That just feels like that toy that you give your kid so that they can shut the hell up for at least 10 minutes so they can kind of bang this around. And that's frankly what I just feel in hand here. I'd rather take something that's a little bit on the smaller side but still feels a little bit more premium, especially when we get to some of the areas in the legs, specifically the knee joint. We'll cover this a little bit more during articulation, but there are times where I'm simply just kind of giving it a slight little flex here to adjust them in a pose, and the joint inside of the knees just feels kind of flimsy and bendy to me in a way where I'm like, this doesn't feel quite right. It almost feels like it could break at any second. So it's a little bit on the feeble side, and then the shoulders as well just feel like very robust pieces that, again, could be sturdy in the sense of being durable so that they don't break instantly, but at the same time, it comes off as cheap at times. The only thing that I will say they did go a little bit above and beyond to not make it so cheap is going to be this head sculpt. This is actually a pretty badass head sculpt that is a little bit more on the unique side to show off a torn open Venom mask that reveals Eddie Brock right underneath, and the actual paintwork and sculpting behind the hair, the expression on his face. You can even see a little bit of red dilation or like red veins going alongside the white of his eye in there, and I think that's a really cool touch to make him look just being torn in two by the Venom symbiote, and you can definitely see an awful lot of that expression, along with a little bit of the tongue kind of stretching out from the underside here and the teeth kind of spreading open. This head sculpt is really, really awesome. It's badass. I would even say that I can't necessarily blame any collector for going out there spending the money just so that they could get this head sculpt and swap it for either the Venom Null 2-pack Venom or any other Venom that they have laying about, and they want to kind of swap and mix and customize, and that would probably be one of the bigger incentives to collect this Venom figure. For a second, I even thought that maybe they were reusing a body type from prior Venom molds, but it looks like this is an original mold, as I noticed that the articulation is also a little bit on the different side. You're able to rotate the head 360, but because of some of the tendrils that are poking along the side of his neck, along with the tongue stretching out from this specific head, it's going to be a little limited, so do be careful. But it is, thanks to that hinge, able to extend fully upwards as well as crunch inwards. You get the top arm joints that are fully able to rotate 360 degrees as well as extend, although they don't really extend all the way up. They kind of stop just shy of the full 90-degree extension. But unlike the other two figures found in the set, you do have butterfly joints, very robust ones, arguably one of the more extendable ones that I've ever encountered on a Marvel Legends, so they could be found right there. Again, a little bit on the girthy side as far as the mold of plastic they used, but it is fully flexible right there, and they don't do anything to compromise the design of the symbiote logo there on the back, so I thought that was actually a nice little touch. We do get bicep swivels that are able to fully rotate right about right there, as well as bending of the elbow joints fully on two joints found right there in the middle of the arm. Full rotation as well as pivoting inwards and downwards of the wrists, which I thought was pretty flexible considering how sturdy the cuff is actually molded alongside the area of the hand. Much like with other Venom figures, you have the hinge here in the middle of the torso that is fully able to extend a little bit towards the back like so, a little generously, but then fully crunch inwards, and then a waist joint that is able to rotate fully 360 degrees. And much like others, you got the top leg joints that are able to extend the leg about that far up. Not much in the form of going back, but then extension is a little decent, stops right about at the 45-degree angle. I can't believe we now live in a world where Riot is able to extend more. The bigger guy is able to do the splits better than Venom. But you do get thigh swivels that are fully able to rotate robustly right about right there. Two joints at the rather feeble knee joints that I kind of complained about a little earlier, but you are fully able to bend them upwards. Just do be careful, because just doing it right now, demonstrating it, they felt off. They felt like they were going, look at that, look at that. I can see it right there. It's happening right there. It's almost bending off to the side, and it feels like they could easily be broken. So maybe not as sturdy as I was being led to believe. Then we get down to the ankles, where sadly there's no form of boot cut similar to that of Riot, so that was a missed opportunity there. But you do get that ankle joint once more that's able to pivot downwards, upwards like so, and then only rotate via the bending or the pivoting inwards and outwards like so. So that's a bummer. That full horizontal rotation is nowhere to be found there. Since I mentioned that the head is a very alluring element for a lot of people who like to do custom jobs and swapping pieces in and out, they naturally gave him swappable pieces for the accessories. Not only can he swap his clawed up hands for some fisted hands, which look awfully familiar. In fact, I would argue that these are pretty much restockings of the swappable hands or swappable fists from the Venom Null 2-pack. They almost look quite identical, to be quite frank. But what is definitely not identical is the extra head sculpt they threw in, which is a fully masked Venom head with an awesome looking tongue extending to the sides. And swapping the heads is actually not too badly. You just got to give the head quick tug, comes off the ball joint. Definitely a lot easier to put on, except still not the easiest of things to do. But when you do put the head on, you notice right here that this is definitely one of the biggest best compliments that I can give this 3-pack is nailing Venom quite an awful lot in form of articulation, sculpting, and most specifically accessories. And it definitely shows that this was probably the one they looked at the most and worked on hardest the most amongst this 3-pack to really give it value, because the extra head here with some really cool detailings amongst the scrunching of the face, the teeth, and most specifically that tongue looks awesome and is a nice little display piece and a very good incentive for people that really want to swap out those heads. And if not for that head, then definitely for the torn up Eddie Brock head from underneath here that I could see a lot of people swapping in for the Venom Null 2-pack or the Venom movie iteration or any prior Marvel Legends Venom that they might have gotten on the side. And it's most definitely gonna be the biggest incentive for a lot of people to pick this setup, because outside of him, this set is most definitely a collector's piece for people that want to be completionists, that want to get the limited edition form of something, because it is in fact an Amazon exclusive. You can't really find it elsewhere. But at $77.99, having only one of the figures to kind of take off in the way that you wanted it to, and then the other two, one of which ended up just being a repaint of a figure I was already lukewarm to, and then the other feeling a little bit on the cheap side for my preference, is just not worth it to me. This is definitely something for people who are very niche amongst these style of figures that maybe harken back to the original sculpts from the late 80s, early 90s of Marvel Legends, when the animated series was taking off, when the comics was in full force, especially during the birth of Venom in those times. This definitely speaks for those older generations of collectors. For someone like me, who is arguably a millennium collector, that's probably something that I would be attracted to most, and couldn't really be found here with the Venom 3-pack. I would say that if you have the money to spare and you grew up during those times, this is a worthwhile purchase, but otherwise, you might have to look elsewhere. This set exhausted me so much that I'm not really down to give each one an individual rating, but the set overall, frankly, will probably get a 5 out of 10 from me, because 2 figures being duds and only one getting by with some really cool sculpting on the heads as well as decent articulation is really not gonna cut it for me. But if you guys are still down to pick up your own, I'm gonna be including the Amazon link in the description. That way you guys can check it out over on their pages. In the comment section, let me know what your guys' generation of growing up collecting figures really speaks to. Do you guys really like the bulkier, much more robust figures such as these from back in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, or do you like some of the more contemporary stuff from the 2000s on, where it's a little bit on the smaller side, less plastic used, but the plastic that is used is a bit more premium, more refined? Let me know your guys' insights. Hit the thumbs up button if you liked this video, hit the thumbs down if you didn't, and as always, stay humble. I'll see you later.